Missouri adds two more offensive linemen, also one of, if not the tallest corner in its history. Dennis Gates making moves too. Let's talk all about recruiting right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And I got to say, I find some of the arguments on the pro St. Louis Billiken side of, hey, well, they should be playing 3 games in St. Louis. I find all of them, well, most of them anyway, to be a little bit spurious. Plus, it's not just football, basketball making moves behind the scenes with a couple of unofficial visits as well. Before I start the show, though, do want to remind you this episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That is odoo.com/lockedon. And a lot of, like I said, a flurry of recruiting activity here in the last few days for Missouri. Most recently, though, just this morning, Kyler Kuhn announced as the 6th offensive lineman in the class for Missouri. This is a big deal for the Tigers. He's been a long-time target for Missouri, beating out the likes of Nebraska and Iowa, most notably a 6'3", 280-pound offensive lineman from the Kansas City, Missouri area. Again, this is a guy Missouri has targeted for well over a year now, somebody they really wanted, and the Tigers have wanted to get a lot of bodies for Brandon Jones, the offensive line coach, everybody in that organization, give themselves a lot of bites at the apple when it comes to, well, offensive line depth. I don't think you can have enough of those talented big bodies, and I think it's pretty obvious the Tigers agree with that philosophy as well, and getting Kyler Kuhn, just a big deal for Missouri, and hopefully Kuhn will be so good that I can dust off the Kuhn and Friends nicknames and jokes, all of that good stuff for you South Park fans out there. But I mentioned Kuhn is Missouri's 6th offensive lineman. Well, since I last talked to you beautiful people, a 5th offensive lineman had been added as well. This time it's Jaylen Hill from the Miami, Florida area. He's even literally a bigger man than Kyler Kuhn at 6'5", 295 at this point in his career. The likes of Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Kansas State were after the young Mr. Hill. So, again, the Tigers have really loaded up here in this 27 class on offensive linemen and really just offensive talent in general, it would seem, with Jack Brown, the tight end, being Missouri's highest-ranked player, Kuhn being in the top 3 or 4 there as well, Braylon Warren, the quarterback. If you're looking at the consensus most highly ranked guys, well, they're all on the offensive side of the ball right now. It seems like Missouri is really concentrating on that particular side of the ball, at least in the high school ranks. And speaking of the offensive side of the ball, well, Kingston Miles may be somebody to watch as well. He's a 4-star running back out of St. Mary's in St. Louis. He's currently an Auburn commit, but as I've said a million times here lately, commitments much more like reservations until you actually get a pen to paper. So I suppose I should make that note with Jaylen Hill and Kyler Kuhn as well. But hey, we got a 3rd reservation/commitment. This one, Ta'Ari Miller. It's either Ta'ari or Tari. Excuse me for not immediately knowing the pronunciation there, but we'll just go with Ta'Ari Miller. 6'4", 180-pound cornerback. There's the important distinction there, along with the fact that he just had an official visit with the Georgia Bulldogs. So like I've said here recently as well several times, it seems like if you're a corner and you're going to play for the Missouri Tigers, you better be at least 6 feet tall. Well, 6'4", now we're getting taller than receivers, at least most of them at that height. So impressive measurables and also an impressive list of not only offers and visitors. Hey, LSU is one of his finalists for Mr. Miller there as well. So just a lot of interesting stuff happening behind the scenes on the recruiting trail for the Missouri Tigers, even though obviously Missouri is not necessarily going to be spending, I would say, at the highest level of high school recruiting anymore, when the Tigers got the likes of Williams Winery, was in on Jackson Cantwell from Missouri, for example, for a long time. Ultimately didn't make his Final Four there. Still, Missouri is clearly not ignoring high school whatsoever. It just seems like they're taking a little bit, taking a different type of strategy, just not paying the top dollar for the tippy-top elite players, but certainly with guys like Jack Brown and Kyler Kuhn and Braylon Warren, Missouri's still getting some highly ranked four-star guys. I think this will still end up being a top 25-ish class. So, again, while high school recruiting seems like it's not as important as it used to be, because quite simply it isn't quite as important, it still really is the lifeblood and foundation of your program in so many ways. And on the basketball side, I got some information from a friend here in town that Tyran Frazier was in Columbia on an unofficial visit. And then, well, it seemed like word got out pretty quickly that that was indeed the case. And Frazier, well, he'd be a nice addition to the 27 class for sure, along with Scotty Adkinson, who to me looks like kind of a ready-made replacement for Jason Crow Jr., who I think everybody assumes is going to be a one-and-done type of prospect. So just 1 year of Crow, move Adkinson in, and, well, looks like you really might have something there. And Frazier at 6'10", 210 pounds, a top 50 player overall. He's a center. Again, a nice fit there along with Adkinson, in my opinion. Also from the Principia School in the St. Louis area. Same as Quentin Coleman, by the way, who is off to Illinois this coming season. I also had some word that another Missouri player, I believe Cameron Barnes, a 6'7" forward from the Kansas City, Kansas area, was in town for an unofficial visit this past weekend as well. But while those things are unofficial, it is now official that the first meeting between Marquette and Missouri in some time, since actually all the way back in 2009, Missouri's last Elite Eight appearance in the second round of that tournament, well, they're going to face off again. And for the first time in the regular season since 1983, Missouri and Marquette are going to play in the regular season in Chicago, in the United Center, by the way. It'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd the rather cavernous 20,000-plus seat building there in Chicago will actually be filled. I will say this, Missouri and Marquette with some interesting history. Those two games in 2003 as well against Dwayne Wade and company, just an incredible basketball game. Ricky Paulding, maybe the best game he's played of his entire life. Arthur Johnson was great as well. Obviously a heartbreaker for Missouri that day. Well, Missouri got it back in the second round, another second-round game a few years later in 2009. Kim English famously made some clutch free throws there down the stretch in an 83-79 Tiger victory. But I will say this, Missouri not only playing in Chicago in a neutral site, not only playing KU in Kansas City, not only playing Nebraska, that's not official yet, but all signs are, I believe, Missouri and Nebraska are going to play in KC as well. Just a whole lot of neutral site games coming in basketball next season, including against St. Louis for the next 3 years, apparently. So, with all that being said, I got to say some of the pro SLU arguments, the arguments for playing this series, to me are pretty weak, I have to admit. But maybe Dennis Gates is seeing something that I don't. There's no doubt about that. So I do kind of want to see it from his perspective coming up on the show. Yeah, I'm going to have an argument with myself. Everybody loves those on Locked On Mizzou. So let's talk about that on the program. But first, workplace chaos can show up fast, and that's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, location, And finding that right person can truly make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. In my opinion, some of the best moves organizations make aren't always the splashiest ones. Sometimes it's finding the person who fits exactly what the team needs in the right situation. Take somebody like Missouri edge coach Brian Early. Not exactly a household name, but a guy who, to me, has been an obvious key part of the team and making this Missouri program what it is. So if you want to find your Brian Early, we got to spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less time, less stress, more results. We need to find the right person. Well, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this program will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Get your daily Locked On Mizzou fix completely ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now and get closer to the Tigers without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonmizzou.supercast.com to claim your free trial. And, I've been talking about the Mizzou-SLU matchup, 3 games between the Tigers and Billikens in the Enterprise Center in St. Louis. And, I don't mind playing SLU whatsoever. I think it's a relatively fun non-conference game, to be sure. My argument has been, gosh, really, all 3 in St. Louis? We couldn't get 1 game in Columbia. It just struck me as strange because, well, for example, Missouri wouldn't play Missouri State 3 straight years in Springfield, even if we're in a neutral site, for example. I will say this, though, from Dennis Gates' perspective, hey, we're recruiting a lot of guys from the St. Louis area right now. I just listed off to you Scotty Atkinson and of course Tyran Frazier and the previously mentioned Quentin Coleman, who didn't go to Missouri. But the point here, hey, there could very well be a method to Dennis Gates' madness that I'm not seeing. I will say, though, the people who pushed back against me weren't making those type of sane arguments. They were making really dumb arguments, I would say, in my opinion. One person saying there's a perception that Missouri is afraid to play in-state schools. Really? There is? Maybe by those schools in particular. I didn't know that this was a national narrative that was happening throughout college basketball. And my point in bringing that up is, who haven't we played? As if St. Louis is some sort of hoops power or something like that. My point is Ohio State, for just to take an example, are they expected to play Toledo every single year? Another city school? They're expected to play Toledo every year in basketball. Well, no, in fact, not only are they not expected, I don't expect them to play Toledo every year. Maybe Toledo expects that. That's my point. Again, to take another example, does Kentucky have to play Western Kentucky every single year? And if they don't, does that mean that they're afraid of Western Kentucky? Listen, Louisville is one thing. That's a game that people actually want to see. Not only Kentucky fans and Louisville fans, but people nationally want to see that game as well. I hate to tell you, SLU fans, nobody cares about Missouri and SLU as a basketball rivalry. Let's just live in reality here. Again, maybe it'll be a fun game. I'm hoping that it is. I'm curious to see how many people actually attend these games, to be brutally honest with you, especially with Missouri fans already having that annual game of bragging rights. Am I going to forego bragging rights to go to the SLU game? I don't think so. And then, hey, that's a second event that I may have to throw down on if I want to go to both of these games. I don't know. I'm just really curious to see. Maybe the SLU fans will really pack it in the Enterprise Center for all 3 of these years. Again, 3 years. It's not just a one-off either. We saw even with the Missouri-Kansas football game, Hey, '07, well, yeah, obviously one of the craziest games of all time. Total sellout. Even the very next year in 2008, Kansas and Missouri were both quite good again. Not as good as they were the previous year. That was not a sellout. There were open seats there. There were diminishing returns each and every time. And, God, that Missouri BYU game that I attended in 2015, an insane Missouri comeback, I mean, it was cavernous. My dad and I were basically the only people in the upper deck, it felt like. And we were questioning our life choices at halftime. I know that. So, listen, I don't want to go too crazy about this. I'm looking for it should be a fun basketball game. And if Missouri happens to lose to what is probably an upcoming St. Louis program here, assuming Josh Schertz sticks around, well, it's not the end of the world even if Missouri loses the game. I think that's actually the plus here, is that St. Louis is now good enough that you're not just playing UMKC or something in a boring neutral site game. You've at least now got what promises to be a potential quad one type of win here. And when you lose those games on a neutral site, they tend to not hurt you as much in the NCAA committee's eyes. So I do see the perspective from Dennis Gates. I don't know. I just was hoping for maybe one game between Missouri and Lewis. And people will say, hey, this is the type of game that if you're Missouri, you should always win it. Don't be afraid. Play it wherever they want it, that type of deal. Well, cool. Let's just play every single game on the road then. Let's never play in Mizzou Arena. Let's give every advantage away because we're just so frickin' masculine and manly and macho, right? I'm sorry, that's just not how typically competitive people with a whole bunch of money on the line, organizations and all that stuff, that's just not typically how they work. And really much more of that attitude, you saw it actually from former Missouri assistant coach Casey Woods, who's now the head coach over at Missouri State. His whole attitude was he was being very tongue-in-cheek when asked about, hey, you guys are scheduled to play Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz in 2029. Well, Casey would say, yeah, bring it on. We'll play them wherever they want, anytime, any place, that type of deal. Well, that should be your attitude when you're Missouri State, because you know the Tigers are not going to come to Springfield. So, hey, bring it on. Eli Drinkwitz, as you might expect, had a spirited and fun response to that as well, basically saying, yeah, I'd love to whoop Casey's butt on the football field, that type of thing, but then went on to just, smile and say, yes, Casey's doing a great job, all that type of stuff. But, hey, in this college football world, 2029 is a long time away, and if Casey Woods really does a great job with the Bears, I hate to say it, he might be moving on to greener pastures by then. So we'll see what happens. And I got some semi-breaking news here on the podcast as Dusty May, the coach of the defending champion now, Michigan Wolverines on the basketball side, well, he's leaving. He's now the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA. Well. This kind of came out of left field, but I will say, I'm already thinking, could this affect the aforementioned St. Louis Billikens? I'll explain coming up on the program here in just a minute. So before I get there, I got to tell you about Odoo, because here's the thing. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales. Somehow none of these actually talk together. Well, that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting, inventory, marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focused on growing the business instead of managing softwares. And the best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. I think that's been a big deal for Missouri football over the last few seasons here. I think everybody is aligned with Eli Drinkwitz right now, whether it's the president, it's the athletic director, of course, the staff, everyone else, donors. I think that's one reason Missouri has worked so well. And I think Udo is going to make your business work just like that. Great organizations win because operations matter. And I think it's at a great price too, by the way. Very, very fair price when you look at their competitors. And that's why you should get Udo. Try for free today at udo.com/lockedon. That's ODOO.com/lockedon. And you thought Mike Anderson's timing 15 years ago or so when he left Missouri, you thought that was rough. Wow, June 22nd, Dusty May deciding to take his talents to the Dallas Mavericks, leaving Michigan in the lurch here. Although you would think Michigan, obviously, hey, your defending national champ here, would have a pretty good list of people, although a shorter list than you might imagine because of the timing here. It's sounding like, well, Michigan is set to promote associate head coach Mike Boynton here to interim head coach. He was Oklahoma State's head coach for a few seasons from 17 until 23. So it's sounding like either they're going to promote from within, maybe give Boynton the job here, take that interim tack off at a certain point, or maybe they'll go big game hunting and try to get Billy Donovan. That seems like the conventional wisdom here as of now. Billy Donovan, of course, two-time national champion with Florida, coached the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Orlando Magic, the Chicago Bulls. He almost took the North Carolina job. It sounded like, well, that didn't come together for whatever reason. The point here, it sounds like Billy is willing to jump back into college basketball coaching here if the right opportunity presents itself. And well, it's hard to find much better one than that. Again, maybe it won't work out, though, again, for whatever reason. If that doesn't happen, maybe St. Louis's Josh Schertz is the guy. Again, it's Boynton from what I've seen. It's Billy Donovan is an obvious candidate. But when I looked at an article from On3, the other coach of the three names listed there was indeed Josh Schertz. Again, timing's going to be tough there. That would be a real tough blow for the Billikens if indeed that happened. I'm not predicting it by any stretch of the imagination. Really, this is a compliment to Josh Schertz. What he's done with St. Louis, especially the last season, he's going to be the type of guy who could be on the move to a higher level potentially soon. Again, I was talking about, hey, Casey Woods might not be around till 29. Well, Josh Schertz may not be around for all three of these games against the Tigers. That's for sure. It'd be fairly ironic if he didn't get to even the first one. That's for darn sure. But hey, thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou today. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show as per usual. I'll have a couple more out for you here this week it's, hey, your team every day, right? Well, your team most days here during June and July as we get into SEC Media Days here. But yeah, got at least two more coming for you this week, including my talk with Stephen Willis. Been teasing it for a while. We did Locked On Mississippi State last week. Let's do Locked On Ole Miss this week. Plenty of former Rebels on the Missouri roster. Lots of crossover. Of course, a game between the Missouri Tigers and the Rebels coming. So that'll be a fun episode with Stephen coming for you on Wednesday here this week, right here on Locked On Mizzou.